Peter truly believed he would never fail Jesus. He meant every word. He would stand beside him, no matter the cost. But fear has a way of breaking even the strongest promises. A promise is a fragile thing. It is born from a moment of courage, a swelling of the heart that says, "I will." For Simon, the one they called Peter, the promise was everything. It was a shield forged in the fire of loyalty, a vow spoken to the man he loved more than life itself. He swore he would follow him anywhere. He swore he would face prison. He swore he would even face death. Peter believed every word. His heart was full of a fierce, protective love. He saw himself as a rock, unmovable and strong, just as the teacher had named him. He would not be the one to break. He would not be the one to fail. But promises are tested not in the light of day, when courage feels easy. They are tested in the deep of night, when fear is a cold hand that grips the soul. They are tested when the world you know is suddenly torn apart. For Peter, that night had come. The air in Jerusalem had grown heavy, thick with unspoken threats and the scent of betrayal. The city, usually alive with the sounds of Passover pilgrims, held its breath. A stillness had fallen over the familiar streets, a quiet that felt more like a warning than a comfort. Something was wrong. Something was about to break. It was not just the sky that was darkening. The promise Peter had made now felt like a stone in his gut. The bold words he had spoken just hours before echoed in his mind, but they sounded different now. They sounded hollow, distant, like the voice of a braver man he used to be. Every shadow seemed to move. Every distant shout sounded like an accusation. The loyalty that had burned so brightly in the lamplight of the upper room now flickered in the rising wind. He was alone with his thoughts. His thoughts were turning against him. The rock felt like it was beginning to crumble into sand, slipping through his own trembling fingers. Peter found himself walking roads he knew by heart, yet they felt alien and hostile. The familiar comfort of the city was gone, replaced by a maze of darkness and unseen dangers. He clutched at the memory of his master's face, the sound of his voice, trying to hold on to the courage he had felt so strongly. But fear is a rising tide. It seeps into the cracks of your certainty. It whispers that your strength is a lie. And in the heart of that sacred city, under a sky that was beginning to weep with rain, Peter's great promise was about to meet its darkest hour. The night was closing in. The city of Jerusalem was a labyrinth of stone and secrets. On this night, it was a place of deep shadows and flickering torchlight. The moon was a ghost behind a veil of clouds, offering no comfort, offering no guidance. The narrow alleyways, usually bustling with life, were now channels of quiet dread. You could hear the whisper of the wind as it moved through the ancient archways. You could hear the distant bark of a dog, sharp and lonely. This was not the city of celebration. This was a city holding a dark secret, a city waiting for a verdict. Its very stones seemed to watch with cold indifference. Peter moved through this landscape like a phantom. He kept to the darkest parts of the streets, his shoulders hunched against more than just the cold. The rain had started now, a soft, persistent drizzle that slicked the cobblestones until they shone like polished obsidian. Each drop that landed on his skin felt like a small, cold accusation. The distant glow of torches from the high priest's courtyard drew him forward. A moth pulled toward a flame that promised not warmth, but destruction. He knew he should not go. He knew it was a place of danger, but he could not stay away. He had to know. Every sound was magnified in the oppressive quiet. The scrape of a sandal on stone, the rustle of a cloak in the wind, the low murmur of voices from a guarded gate. These were the sounds of a world closing in. Peter's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the slow, mournful rhythm of the falling rain. He was a fisherman, a man of open seas and wide skies. This world of high walls, secret dealings, and hidden knives was not his own. He felt trapped, exposed, a small boat caught in a violent and unpredictable storm, far from any shore. His promise to be brave felt like a distant memory from another lifetime. Now, there was only the cold reality of the moment. The fear was a physical thing, a knot in his stomach, a tightness in his chest that made it hard to breathe. He was walking toward the very center of his fear. Each step was an argument between the man he swore he would be and the man he was afraid he was becoming. The night was a canvas of black and gray, and against it, the small, flickering lights of human cruelty burned with a terrible brightness. And Peter kept walking deeper into the shadows. The betrayal began not with a kiss, but with the flicker of torches in the distance. They appeared first as a scattering of angry fireflies among the olive trees of Gethsemane. Peter had been heavy with sleep, a strange and disloyal exhaustion that had clung to him like a shroud. The teacher had asked him to watch and pray just for 1 hour, but his eyes had betrayed him. His spirit was willing, but his body was weak. The sight of those approaching lights jolted him awake, chasing away the fog of sleep and replacing it with a cold, sharp dread. This was it, the moment he had warned them about. The quiet of the garden was shattered by the clank of armor, the crunch of boots on dry earth, the low, menacing murmur of a crowd. Peter's hand went to the sword hidden in his cloak, his fisherman's knuckles white and hard. Then he saw Judas, one of their own. He stepped out from the crowd, his face a pale mask in the torchlight. The kiss, when it came, was a violation. It was a peaceful gesture twisted into an act of profound betrayal. It was the signal. Suddenly, the chaos erupted. Hands, rough and unfeeling, grabbed at Jesus. Rage, pure and hot, surged through Peter, overwhelming the fear. He drew his sword, the cold steel a clumsy and unfamiliar weight in his hand, and he swung blindly into the chaos. The teacher's voice cut through the noise, calm and commanding, healing the wound Peter had inflicted. Peter's fleeting courage evaporated, replaced by a profound and chilling confusion. He had been rebuked. The disciples scattered like startled birds, melting into the shadows of the olive grove. Peter ran with them, his heart pounding with adrenaline and shame, but he could not run far. A terrible magnet pulled him back. He followed the mob from a distance, a lone shadow between doorways and alleys. He slipped in through a smaller entrance. He stepped from cold drizzle into a circle of light and warmth. A charcoal fire burned at the courtyard center. The heat warmed his skin. The company felt like a trap. He tried to make himself small, a fisherman pretending to be someone else. Peter said nothing. He stared into the flames, close to the man he loved yet unbearably distant. A young servant girl, hands outstretched to the flames, turned and looked at him. Her gaze, not hostile, just curious, and it found his face. A young servant girl identified Peter as one who was with Jesus of Nazareth. For Peter, the words landed like a physical blow. The air rushed from his lungs. His heart, pounding, seemed to stop. All the faces around the fire turned to him. Peter denied it, claiming he did not know what they meant. His voice sounded thin, unfamiliar. He forced it to sound dismissive, annoyed. Inside, his world was collapsing. The first crack in the rock, the first stone dislodged. He turned away from the fire. He walked toward the gateway as if to leave, but couldn't go. His feet felt like lead. He drifted back toward the small crowd. The same servant girl who had first spoken to him was now talking to the others. He saw her point in his direction. Another accuser asserted Peter had been with Jesus. Once again, all eyes turned to Peter. The spotlight was back on him, brighter and hotter than before. He had to build a wall around himself, a fortress of falsehood. Peter denied again, adding an oath in desperation. He insisted he did not know Jesus. It was a conscious act of disowning. He was denying his friend, and with each word, another piece of his soul chipped away and fell into the fire. An hour passed. Peter moved away from the group again, pacing restlessly in the covered portico that ran along the side of the courtyard. He was a caged animal. One of them, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off in the garden, walked over to him. The man's face was hard, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. A relative of the wounded man recognized Peter from the garden. A bystander noted Peter's Galilean accent, confirming suspicion. The walls were closing in. All reason fled. All loyalty was forgotten. He began to curse and to swear, the frantic babbling of a drowning man. Peter denied a third time, completing the prophecy. It was the sound of a rooster crowing, heralding a dawn that Peter wished would never come. The cry sliced through the thick fog of his fear and denial. The next, he was frozen, a statue of stone in the middle of the courtyard. But for Peter, it was the sound of a gavel falling, a judgment pronounced. "Before the rooster crows," Jesus had said, "you will deny me 3 times." Now the impossibility was a fact. He could count his denials like coins of betrayal. 1, 2, 3 times. The rooster had not been wrong. Just then the main doors of the high priest's house swung open. A group of guards emerged, leading a prisoner. It was Jesus. As Jesus was led past, he turned his head. For a fraction of a second, in the chaotic swirl of guards and torchlight, their eyes met across the courtyard. It was not a look of anger. It was not a look of condemnation. There was only a glance. That look did what no accusation, no threat, no sword could do. It broke him. It shattered the last of his defenses. Peter stumbled away from the courtyard, out into the dark, empty streets of Jerusalem. He was utterly alone now. He found himself in a deserted alleyway, his legs no longer able to support him. He slid down the wall until he was a crumpled heap on the glistening cobblestones. And then the tears came. They were a violent, wrenching storm that tore through his entire being. Great, heaving sobs shook his body. He buried his face in his hands. The shame was a physical poison. The guilt was a crushing weight. Each sob was a confession. I promised, I swore, I failed. He wept for the promise he had shattered. He wept for the friend he had betrayed. These tears were his own cleansing, a bitter baptism of regret. Dawn arrived not with a triumphant burst of light, but with a quiet, gentle surrender. For Peter, the light was an intrusion. He had reached the end of himself, the desolate shore of his own strength. He believed his story was over. But the story of grace does not end where our failures begin. It begins there. We make promises we cannot keep. We fall when we swear we will stand. We deny the things we hold most dear. Peter's story is our story. Faith is not built on the shifting sands of our own ability, but on the unshakable rock of a love that pursues us even when we run away. Because even when we fall, grace still reaches us. Even when we fail, mercy finds a way. The most painful nights can lead to the most beautiful mornings. The love we betray is the very love that waits with unending patience to welcome us home. It is a journey we never, ever have to make alone. The light is always there, waiting for us to finally look up.